Mr. Muilenburg, I have to say the testimony here today has been quite dismaying. I want to focus on the text exchange that has been referred to and has been publicly reported on. This was a text exchange between Mark Faulkner, who was then Boeing's technical pilot for the MAX, chief technical pilot for the MAX, and Mr. Gustafson, who in 2018 was promoted to being Boeing's 737 chief technical pilot. Is that right?
I believe that's the case, Senator. Yep.
So this exchange is stunning. Mr. Faulkner, oh, shocker alert. MCAS is now active down to M2. It's running rampant in the sim on me. At least that's what Vince thinks is happening. Gustafson's response, oh, great. That means we have to update the speed trim description in Volume 2. Mr. Faulkner, so basically I lied to the regulators unknowingly. Gustafson, it wasn't a lie. No one told us that was the case. Faulkner, I'm leveling off at like 4,000 feet, 230 knots, and the plane is trimming itself like crazy. I'm like, what? Gustafson, that's what I saw on Sim 1, but on approach, I think that's wrong. Faulkner, granted, I suck at flying, but even this was egregious. That exchange describes what happened in Lion Air and Ethiopian Air. The men and women who are gathered here with the photos of your loved ones, 346 people are dead because what these chief pilots described as egregious and crazy, that's their language. That's Boeing's internal language in this exchange. Now, what I find truly stunning, Boeing handed this exchange over to the Department of Justice in February. In March, I chaired a hearing of the Aviation Subcommittee on these two crashes. Boeing did not see fit to give this committee that exchange, nor did Boeing give it to the FAA or the Department of Transportation. But what I find most stunning is your testimony here today that you said you first learned of this exchange a couple of weeks ago. These are senior leaders at Boeing in an exchange saying, and I will quote again, so I basically lied to the regulators. Look, I've practiced law a lot of years. You had your lawyers look over this document, and they read a senior leader after these crashes has occurred saying they lied to the regulators. Mr. Muilenburg, how in the hell did nobody bring this to your attention in February when you produced this to the Department of Justice? How did you just read this a couple of weeks ago?
Senator, again, to clarify my earlier comments, I was made aware of the existence of this kind of document, this issue, as part of that discovery process in the investigation early in the year, as you pointed out. At that point, I counted on my counsel to handle that appropriately. And
did you read this exchange? Look, I was made aware documents were being produced, that is passive voice and disclaiming responsibility. You're the CEO. The buck stops with you. Did you read this document? And how did your team not put it in front of you, run in with their hair on fire, saying, we got a real problem here? How did that not happen? And what does that say about the culture at Boeing if they didn't give it to you and you didn't read it? And if you didn't say, I want to read and see what happened? Your testimony here earlier today is, well, we're not sure what they were talking about because he's not at Boeing anymore. How did you not in February set out a 9-alarm fire to say, we need to figure out exactly what happened, not after all the hearings, not after the pressure, but because 346 people have died and we don't want another person to die?
Senator, as you mentioned, I didn't see the details of this exchange until recently. And we're not quite sure what Mr. Faulkner meant by that exchange. His lawyer has suggested he was talking about a simulator that was in development in that time period. That's where he was working. That could be the case. We don't know. I fully support diving deep into this and understanding what he said and what he meant. But I can also tell you that in that same time frame where his original message was made.
Mr. Gustafson still works at Boeing. Correct?
Senator, yes, he does.
Have you had that conversation with him?
Senator, my team has talked with Patrick as well.
Have you had that conversation with him?
Senator, I have not.